The U.S. pulled out of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal last year, reinstating sanctions on Tehran, including import ban on Iranian oil. 8 countries, namely South Korea, China, India, Japan, Taiwan, Turkey, Italy, and Greece, were granted temporary sanctions waiver on Iranian oil. 3 of them, Greece, Italy, and Taiwan, stopped importing oil when Trump pulled out of the Iranian deal. But the remaining 5, including South Korea, asked for an extension on the waivers. Now, Washington officially has said the time is up and the waivers will end for those countries as of May 2nd. With global oil prices surging at the news, today we go in depth on the impact of Iranian oil waiver termination on the Korean economy. For that, Dr. Se-ryeon, law professor at Kyung Hee University, now joins us in the studio. It's always good to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
So Washington's big announcement has, it certainly shook the world, with many countries and the global market swiftly reacting to the news. Now, the Trump administration has explained that it was aimed at blocking Iran's main source of revenue. Now, what are some main reasons behind the decision?
Well, Trump is applying the maximum pressure to Iran. When he pulled out of the Iranian deal, he outright said that I want the better deal. So at this point, he's trying to push Iran with this zero tolerance policy to get the better deal out of it. However, I think there are some more reasons to it. You can kind of look into his behaviors and what kind of pledges he made. He always thrived on Obama blaming, and he pulled out a lot of deals that Obama and previous presidents made. Climate change, Iranian deal, NAFTA, chorus, you name it. There are more. And his positioning as a tough negotiator and winner, I think that that translates his tactics in this negotiation. Also, I think there are some reasons to suspect that his friends in the Middle East, Israel and Saudi Arabia, might be in his mind to support his friends, so to speak. And also, I think you can't really erase this suspicion that because of the Mueller report that came out, a little bit redacted, but enough to show that there is enough the evidences or indications that he might have obstructed justice. So there is an active talk about impeachment in the Congress. I think whenever Trump does something, a lot of people are seeing that as what is he's trying to divert from. And if it is a right guess, then Mueller report might be, or the domestic situation might be one of the reasons why he's taking this tough stance.
So a combination of quite a number of reasons. Now, 8 countries, including South Korea, were given sanctions waivers last year for 180 days, meaning they could continue to import Iranian oil. Why were the 8 countries given special exemptions?
Well, that 180 days period might be considered as a preparation. If you applied the zero tolerance policy right then and there, probably there would have been, if not a shock, but definitely a oil price hike. So eventually, waivered countries have 180 days to diversify their sources or look at the sourcing situation. I think during that period, what Trump was doing is to persuade the Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries to increase the volume of the production of crude oils and others, because, you know, the world price is always a mechanism of the supply and demand. So there is a need for preparation period to ramp up the production.
So it was sort of like a mercy period for the preparation for a soft landing of the new announcement. Now, what would happen if any country imported Iranian oil after the May 2nd deadline?
Right, a lot of people ask that question. It's a U.S. sanction. Why do we have to be affected so much? Well, the U.S. being the biggest economy in the world, the sanction includes the tough measures about the countries who deal with Iran's so-called secondary sanctions, secondary boycotts. So what happens to any countries that continue to deal with Iran will face the sanctions from the U.S. themselves. not being able to trade or deal with the U.S. companies. And that would be the bigger break or bigger shock to the system.
Immediately following Washington's announcement, global oil prices soared to its highest level since October last year. Now, of course, that's over fears of reduced oil supply. How do you forecast the global oil prices from this point on? How long before the prices settle again?
I think at this point there's some doubts as to whether the stable supply or the increased supply of oil would come to the world market. So there's that. And also, Iran has also threatened that they will close or block the Hormuz Strait, which accounts for about 1/3 of all the oil trade. So by threatening that increases the uncertainties in the marketplace. And the price will fluctuate as the uncertainties continues. I think that it'll come down to stability once we see that Iran cannot block the Hormuz Strait, and also the OPEC and Saudi Arabia and other countries will ramp up the supply so that the necessary amount is secured.
Do you, in your opinion, do you think Iran will be able to actually close the strait?
Well, that would be a very hard proposition because it involves a military showdowns to an extent, and probably because U.S. carries the biggest stake in the world. At this point, they can try, but probably it's going to be a hard proposition to succeed. But it does increase the uncertainties and also the volatility of the region. So it's not an easy matter to just compare the stakes between two countries.
The countries that rely heavily on Iranian oil will be hit hard once we enter the month of May. China is definitely the biggest importer of Iranian oil, and South Korea is also one of the biggest importers of Iranian oil. Now, how badly would our South Korean firms be affected?
Well, I think there would be some negative effect, but as we have talked about, there were 180 days of preparation period, so a lot of companies have diversified. And Iranian import was not as big as before anyways. It used to be about 8 to 9%, but it's now down to 5 to 6%. I think the diversification may not be a problem, but I think that the particular kind of oil that we imported from Iran, which is so-called the condensate, is a main ingredient for naphtha, which is a raw material for probably most of the petrochemical industry products. I mean, you name it, the clothes, the beauty products, medicines, and handphones and TVs. So everywhere it goes, that raw material plays a hand. So in that sense, petrochemical industry in Korea, which is a significant industry, probably will face some difficulties on the short term.
Now, China and Turkey are already making stern objections to this decision to end waivers on Iranian oil. If the exempted countries make a strong collective voice, could that be perhaps a game changer in the future?
Well, that depends on what kind of diplomatic stances both sides have. At this point, Donald Trump, his strength at this point is to be inflexible in this kind of situation. So I don't think he will back down, because backing down on this kind of stance is viewed as a weakness to others, and that's probably the most feared position that he's facing.
So a reversal of the decision is very unlikely. Now, it looks like increased oil supply from other petropowers is critical at this point. How are the oil-producing countries reacting so far?
The Saudi Arabia already announced that they will play a hand in this to help out the U.S. I think that they're very close. I think they're closer than any period in history. And also, Saudi Arabia's leadership in the OPEC suggests that probably they'll have little difficulty ramping up the production. especially because they have already imposed a agreed upon decrease in production last year and several years ago. So in that sense, it's just reversing the decision that they had, and they have the production facilities all working at this point.
Now, the South Korean government has said it'll try its best to make its stance clear on the issue. But nonetheless, several countermeasures are deemed necessary at this point to mitigate the fallout on the Korean economy.
Right. Both private industries and the government, I think that the first stance they had was to persuade the U.S. to continue the waiver programs. But at this point, because of the domestic issues and the myriads of issues that faces Donald Trump, he sort of set his foot down. At this point, probably getting additional waiver period might not be very plausible at this point. I think that private industries probably have to further diversify their sources, and the government probably will have to institute some programs to compensate for some of the difficulties the industry goes through. I think that's the extent that we can do in a short term. I think that in the long term, it depends on what kind of a stance that Iran takes, whether they will fold or whether they will try to team up with other objecting countries. That could include China and also other countries in the Middle East.
The U.S. has emphasized maximum pressure on Iran when making the big announcement. Now, many believe that this may also be sending an indirect message to North Korea. Your take on this issue?
I think so. They explicitly say that we're not going to make another North Korea out of Iran. So in the spirit of nipping in the bud, I tried to kind of close down any possibilities that Iran could grow into a threat that the North Korea poses these days. So there's always at the back of their mind the prospect of not making Iran another North Korea. But on the other side is also true that this kind of zero-tolerance policy could be a message to North Korea that we're not going to take midway point or a very haphazard deal. It has to be complete, and it has to be a clean slate in terms of denuclearization. So it's not a good message for Kim Jong-un at this point, who's trying to put some kind of midway point, some kind of a deal that goes step by step.
Now, one more question before I let you go. U.S.-China trade talks are still ongoing.
Right.
Now, could this decision become another potential battle between the two countries, and how would this affect the ongoing trade talks between U.S. and China?
I think this is another grievance that China has because of in their mind, the bullying tactic of the United States. Their economic position has decreased. I think this is another point where they can put it on the negotiation table if the United States wants further cooperation, especially in the North Korean nuclear deal. Then they would say United States should be easing some tensions in this area. But I think that Donald Trump does not really back down on having multiple fronts at this point. There are quibbles with North Korea, Iran, and China and Russia, and so on and so forth. So it's a dramatic situation where the Donald Trump may or may not win all the fronts, but it seems like everything has an interconnection between them.
All right, Dr. Song, thank you so much for your insights today.
My pleasure.
And that wraps up this edition of News in Depth. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back with more timely and interesting topics to discuss with an expert, same time tomorrow.